You're listening to the Rethreading Madness podcast, which airs live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We are recorded and produced on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to our show.
I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright.
I'm Bernadine Fox, and welcome to our show. Initially, we talked with Paint, the person I'm about to interview, about how he fell through the cracks in the mental health field. But then we turned our attention to cyberbullying, and in particular, the experience of having his image being used in the production of a derogatory internet meme and its impact on him. Cyberbullying is a form of bullying that occurs on the internet. Because of its nature, the use of a person as representative of a derogatory idea or in support of someone else's political ideation is common. The internet allows the cyberbullying to take on a life of its own and within hours go viral, racing around the globe. In that, one person, a real person's whole personage, becomes a joke, being used by people who would never say these things to others in real life. And not only have they never met the person they are mocking, they most likely never will. The impact is insidious and profoundly traumatic, and our guest today experienced this firsthand. Stay tuned. Listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and right now I'm chatting with Paint. Paint, do you go just as Paint, or is there another name that you go by as well?
No, just Paint.
Paint's work as a poet and multimedia artist is informed by being polygendered, disabled, autistic, and mad. And when I read your bio, Paint, I was impressed by just how many things, components intersect with making up who you are. You are so broad. You have such a range. It blew my socks off. So thank you for being out there. We were talking before about how you fell through cracks when you reached out for help. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about that for folks.
Yeah. So I grew up in rural Alberta, and there's not a lot of resources there, but also my family had sort of they didn't have resources for my family. There was a lot of, I think, sort of things happening. My brother was nonverbal and autistic, so a lot of the attention was on him. And I think I just kind of got lost in the shadow of that a little bit. And then, my kneecap started dislocating when I was 11. I had 2 knee surgeries by the time I was 16. And I didn't have vocabulary for what was happening to me. I wasn't given diagnoses or words for why things were hard or why things were not going the way that they should. And that just sort of persisted. And I tried really hard to, I think, fit in. And by the time I reached my early 20s, I was almost finished an undergrad in disability studies, and I had a psychosis. And I look back on that psychosis as a time when it was like my brain just kind of burnt out and exploded from everything that I was trying so hard to be, because I was trying so hard to just sort of fit into like the expectations of the world around me, and I didn't have any like any concept that I could be anything other than what I was told that I was, right? And I was never given words like disabled. I was never diagnosed as autistic when I was young. I and I think I just felt really alone, and there was this tipping point where I felt like, oh, I've achieved all of these goals and I feel like sort of like this perfect woman, and it just felt so empty, and I just like my mind just sort of fell off this cliff.
Mm. So it sounds like I also grew up in Alberta, just to put that out there. So when you say rural Alberta, I know exactly what you're talking about. It sounds like you bought into the idea that there was one normal way to be, and you worked your ass off to be that. Is
Yeah.
that without, and didn't have the words for how you were disabled or how you might be different? There was no room for that at all.
No.
So in all of that, you did go to disability studies. That's must have given you some clarity.
Yeah, like I think I was motivated to do that because of my brother initially, but like I think it was also, I was searching for those answers for myself.
Right, of course. That makes sense. And did you find answers?
I wouldn't say through the like there was definitely, I think, things I learned, like I learned about like social constructs, that just like really blew my mind. There were things that just really blew my mind. But then after my psychosis, it was pretty much impossible to return to school.
Let's talk about your psychosis. What does that mean to you? Like, it's a word, but lots of people don't know what that is. Lots of people are afraid of it. What did it mean for you?
It's really hard to get into, and it's actually not something I talk about a lot. I talk about a lot about myself all the time. I'm the kind of person who's like very open book about almost everything that I've gone through in my life. But in my psychosis, there was just this like rapid dissolution of reality. And it tied in with the mania. It's like if my mind was making connections too fast between things, and like it couldn't sort the information. So like the connections were kind of like illogical. Like I saw a blue car, so I thought of a certain person, so I like chased the blue car. And then I was saying things like not necessarily believing that I was those things, but sort of like enacting. And there was this point where I was trying to get home from the hospital because I had a friend actually drop me off at the hospital, and then the hospital let me go, and I was in full-blown psychosis, and the hospital let me go when I was completely psychotic in the middle of winter.
Oh, God.
Which is horrible when you think about it. Like,
yeah, Alberta winters are not the thing to be messed with, quite frankly.
And I was like, oh yeah, I can get home, I can do everything, I'm fine, it's great. And my phone was dead, and I went outside, I chased a blue car, I ended up at the LRT station, but the University of Alberta LRT station is quite the maze of escalators and stairs and elevators. And so I ended up not even able to get down to the tracks because I was so confused by the escalators, and I thought that I was negotiating my way through hell. I left like a bag somewhere because I was like, well, maybe I need to like leave this behind, or I need to do this, or I need to do this. So it was like I was negotiating with the universe to try to get through to get onto the train. And then by the time I got onto the train, it was going in the wrong direction. And then by the time I realized that, like, I was still like, I was going through so much, but I got off the train, and then I was kind of like lost and like wandering around, and I wasn't able to sit down to wait. And I ended up being stuck between, I was walking back towards the station, and there was like sort of like, you go over the tracks to get in. And I was sort of like in between the two sets of tracks. Like the one going north and the one going south, that I was like on the sidewalk in between them. And I stepped forward and there was a pillar. And when I stepped forward and I leaned forward, there was like a train that was almost coming.
Hmm.
And then when I leaned back, there was no train. And this was the moment when I realized, like, I had no idea what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I was terrified. I was terrified that if I moved from this spot where I was safe between where the trains go, that I would, because like I could just step in front of a train, I wouldn't know it because I was in some like alternate dimension.
Right.
So I sat down and I started crying, and like some stranger came by and like asked me if I was okay, and I said no, and I got him to like hold my hand and like walk me off from there. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the people who took me in, I think that they thought that I was trying to kill myself. I think that's
Mm.
why I was committed.
Right.
Like, and I tried to explain by drawing pictures of like what I had experienced during my psychosis, trying to explain like what had happened through like pictures, like drawings. And I gave them to the doctors, and I think they just ignored my drawings. And then the nurses, I talked about different things in my life aside from this. And, they treated me very badly, and they assumed very bad things about me. Like they thought that I vandalized the room I was in when I didn't, because the previous patient had vandalized it and I had covered the vandalism because I didn't like looking at it. And then at one point the vandalism was uncovered, and then they just assumed that I did it, and they didn't believe me.
Wow.
And they
So,
also, like the nurses, they said things to my mom like, oh, you don't know what she's done, like you don't know what kind of person this is, like. And it was just really like awful. It was just a really awful experience.
so did they make your mom feel like she couldn't trust you, or?
No, my mom was like a very strong advocate for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had to like write a letter basically trying to like insist that they accept her advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the doctors, stopped treating me as horrible as my mom was able to advocate for me. And my
Oh,
mom,
thank God for your
she's a
mom.
wonderful, she's a wonderful advocate because she has so much experience advocating for my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So she knew how to communicate with the doctors when I couldn't.
Well, thank God. Everybody needs a mom like that, honestly.
Yeah.
There have been other ways that you've sort of fallen through the cracks with psychologists and psychiatrists around gender stuff, and that you talked about having to prove your sanity.
Yeah. Yeah. So um when I was first discharged from my psychosis and everything, I was on medications for about 6 months, and I slowly weaned myself off of medications, and I was like, life was hard and I was struggling. And like I'm on medications now, but I don't think it was a mistake to go off of medications at that time in my life, because it enabled me to have some clarity, because it was when I went off my medications that I was able to kind of understand why the psychosis happened, and start to understand and unpack the things around like my gender and my sexuality.
Mhm.
And then by the time I saw a gender doctor, they're like, okay, well, step one is you had this psychosis in the past. So in order for doctors to believe that you are of your right mind, you have to be medicated, essentially.
Oh my gosh. So you went off
And
the medication, and by doing that, you were able to understand what happened to you. But to prove your sanity, you had to go back on medication that made you unable to sort things through. Am I getting that right?
well, so like the medication that I went back on was not a mood stabilizer, which is what I needed. Initially, I was prescribed antipsychotics, and I think I was misdiagnosed as schizoaffective.
Mm,
When initially I was diagnosed as bipolar, because like I think that like maybe that was like sort of activated through
right.
the manic psychotic episode. But yeah, this particular doctor, I think labeled me as schizoaffective, but he never told me that, right? So he was treating me as if I was schizoaffective as opposed to bipolar. And I also have like chronic health problems and pain and communication issues, mostly related to being neurodivergent. And so I think he was attributing that to mental illness as well. And he was attributing my expression, and my ways that I expressed myself, to to mental illness, right? So he would always just assume that I was unwell. And I was put on medication that caused my eyes to stare up. I had a bad reaction. I had ocular dystonia.
And what is
And
that? It makes you stare?
It made me stare up. So I basically
Oh.
lost the use of my eyes
Oh my God.
for hours at a time. And it took him several months of like trying to counteract the side effect, like with other medications, for it before he took me off of it. And it was like I was trying to work a full-time job. It was not safe for me to be moving through the world where I was having these like unexpected attacks, basically, where I lost my ability to control my eyes.
And how long did that go on for?
Like 3 to 6 months. I can't remember very clearly because it sort of like it set on slowly. And like first time it happens, you're like, oh, that's not a big deal. And then by the end of it, like the last 3 months of it was very intense. It was happening like almost daily by the end.
So this medication was for a mental health issue that you were having?
Yeah, they were the antipsychotics, but I didn't need to be on antipsychotics. I needed to be on mood stabilizers, is what I think. And also, I think that the medication that deals with this side effect also treats nerve pain. And so,
Right.
like, I was on a secondary medication to try to deal with the side effect, but I think that my body was actually just using that medication to help deal with my pain that I had
Right.
because of my other conditions.
Right.
So this medication to try to manage this side effect didn't help me, right? And so ultimately, by the end of this, like I was borderline suicidal again, and I ended up like trying to go to the ER to get admitted because I was suicidal. And it was only after I sought the advice of 2 other psychiatrists, right, the one in the ER and another one I had seen previously, that I was able to get him to change course. And he
So
kept on.
I just want to be clear about something. Your psychiatrist diagnosed you with schizoaffective, but didn't tell you, and then put you on medication for schizoaffective. And that was, of course, the wrong medication. And you stayed on that for 6 months before he figured out that that was the wrong medication for you, while you weren't able to see during that time, for periods of time.
I was on the medications, the antipsychotic medication, for about a year. The side effects started around 6 months, and then it started to get bad around 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry. That is all kinds of messed up that I can't even begin to get into. But at the same time, it's not something I haven't heard before, where people are being put on the wrong medication, and when it's not working and they're having all these side effects that are really quite disabling and debilitating for them to be able to function in the world. All the while you are in a position as somebody who lives with a mental health challenge, to try and be okay and present as okay, so that somebody tells you you're sane again. It's a really untenable place to be put into, because you have no power to change it.
Yeah, and there's this complicating factor too when it comes to gender stuff, is because you want to be perceived as mentally well so that you get access to treatment for your gender stuff. Right.
So
and
you can't be
you can't be unwell if you're dealing with gender stuff and mental health stuff. There's this culture that we have within the trans community, where we try to support each other on like, how do we have to present ourselves to doctors so that they'll take us seriously.
Right.
And so it becomes harder because it's like you're not actually treating you're not actually able to treat me because I don't feel like I can even, like, it doesn't even feel safe to show my full self.
I think that that feeling is probably right. It doesn't sound like you can be your full self and be able to get the help that you need, which is ridiculous because that's what they're there for, right?
Yeah, like, I don't know. I really think that gender treatment and psychology, psychiatry, they need to be separated. They're not in the same vein. I think that I think that they should be, like, there's a lot of better approaches, like consent-based care that people can do and things like that. And I don't know. I just, I don't know. It's a complicated thing, I guess, about how people manage that. But for me, it just really, it really ended up being a destructive intersection.
Right. Were you able to finally get the care that either the help that you needed?
I did eventually get like hormone treatment, and I am on like wait lists for some surgery stuff.
Mhm.
I'm non-binary, so like I don't want to like transition to be a man. That's not my goal. Like, I want to transition to be me, and
Right.
who I am is something that is just different and unique, and
Right.
that's okay, and that's wonderful, and that's like something that I need to like embrace and celebrate and not be ashamed of.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. And have you been able to get help for being bipolar?
Yes, so I did eventually start seeing a different psychiatrist, and immediately, because like one of the measures of like my wellness too was like my ability to work, so there's a lot of pressure put on me to keep working,
Mhm.
and immediately I was in crisis, and she recognized that I was in crisis, and was able to enable me to stop working,
Oh,
to take leave for
right,
disability.
right.
And then I have kind of rolled along from one support to the next, and finally have landed on like long-term disability supports, because like managing a mental illness is a full-time job.
I'm glad you're at this point in your life, and I'm sorry that it has been so difficult to get there. Good for you for doing the work that you did to get where you are.
Thank you.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm speaking with Paint about all things paint. Actually, if you look her up, you're going to find this wide-ranging bio that goes from one end to the other. And one of the things that I love about that paint, just to say this out loud, is that so often in our society, we are told to slim ourselves down to one thing and one goal and one person. And I've always found it very, very hard. So your bio is very refreshing to me, and I appreciate it. So, but I wanted to talk to you about cyberbullying because I know that you were a victim of a meme that went viral, and it was not a nice meme. It was something that was very derogatory towards you. And I was hoping that we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So just a quick correction. So my pronouns are he or they. And
I'm sorry, did I say she?
yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
My apologies.
It happens. It
It
happens.
does. It does.
Yeah. I think one of the things that people assume about trans people too is that we're really uptight about mistakes and mishaps, and like sometimes they happen and that's okay. And it's when people are intentionally negative
Right.
that that kind of thing becomes like like problematic and really vicious, because like there is often room for a little bit of grace and learning, and that's one of the things that's like kind of like weaponized against us too, is like this idea that like our pronouns are they're a point of bullying as
Right.
well.
So they
So
become a way of disrespecting people,
yeah,
right?
it's all about the
And
tone. Like I've had people who use the correct pronouns for me, but the way in which they use them, I can still tell that they're actually carrying a very strong tone of disrespect, and they're almost like there's this sometimes uh there's a word for it. I just can't think of it at the moment, but we're
Malicious?
malicious compliance, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Right, where
malicious
they are
compliance.
so you can't complain, you can't call them out because they are so like on the ball with it. And that doesn't mean that there's not something negative happening. So like everything that happens in interactions between human beings are incredibly nuanced. There's like no
Absolutely.
way around that,
No.
right?
Yeah. There is
And
no way
so
around that. It's true. Nonverbal language is so huge and can be, as you just said, weaponized.
yeah, exactly. And the danger and like the really negative and dehumanizing part of being made into an internet meme is the way it tries to flatten you,
Mm,
right? It tries to turn a human being into something that is one dimensional, digestible, and mockable. You're no longer seeing the human who's on the other side of that equation. You're just seeing a joke.
do you think that that happens because we are such yeah, well, at least here in the West, we are a community, a society that has been raised on images, either TV or now social media, and our even our photographs are just flashes. When I was a kid, I'm old, when I was a kid we had real film, and so you didn't take 20 pictures hoping that one of them didn't have their eyes closed. You took one and hoped it didn't have its eyes closed. So do you think that we have reduced our sensibilities about the objects in our photographs down to that one-dimensional image, and so therefore we're no longer considering the human?
I like that does tie into a lot of things like what you're saying because we have these like incredibly high standards. I think that our standards for beauty have become really just exaggerated
Mm,
with the internet because everything can be like photoshopped and perfected, and it is easy to like take something of someone and either pull it out of context or take quote unquote like an unflattering photo and then like make that the subject of a joke. Um, the photo that was used in the meme that was harassing me, um, like it was these were photos that I was proud of. Like initially it started with my dating profile. My dating profile was posted in a Facebook group with several 100,000 followers in that group and
mm,
got like hundreds of comments, and I was getting private messages. And then it just continued for
mm,
months where I was getting lots of harassing comments. I had to lock down like different aspects of my social media. And I'm a spoken word poet and an artist, and so this was detrimental to me because I
mhm.
could not have a public facing persona as
Right.
much as I wanted to because it was unsafe. People were posting private information about me. People were posting lies about me. There was threads about me on different types of websites, and it's incredibly easy these days for someone to go viral in this way and for the general public to maybe not even know because the internet has so many like niche communities and there could be millions of people in these niche communities,
Hmm.
and it doesn't like necessarily reach the broader thing. And so like I'm not the only person who's been made into this kind of a meme where it only catches fire in a small hateful group and it doesn't necessarily resonate with the general public because to them the meme makes no sense because the meme only makes sense in a hateful context.
Mm,
um and the photo that was then used in the meme was one that was pulled from my Facebook profile.
right.
And it was a selfie that I took that I actually really liked.
Mm, that's
Um
terrible. I have very few selfies I like. So on a very sort of superficial level, I would hate that that was the one that somebody used to make into a meme.
Yeah, yeah. And so I kind of became this like stock photo for like social justice warrior, non-binary, trans person. That's that's the way it was that's the way it was used.
Mm-hmm.
And it it came up again on YouTube on different people's channels, and a lot of people who wouldn't name me, right? But they would use the photo of me. So now not only am I a stock photo, but I'm also unnamed. And then even when people are posting critiques of those types of videos that are hateful videos, they're still not naming me because maybe they don't know who I am, or they're thinking that they're protecting me, but no one's actually contacting me to talk to me about my own experience. So like the entire thing was incredibly isolating, because it's like, not only do I have this like hate crowd talking about me, but the few people who aren't hateful that are talking about me, they aren't talking to me. And so, like, in a way, I'm just part of their clout. And I end up getting nothing because I have to shut down my social media because I'm scared, because I'm getting death threats. And it's like incredibly frustrating. And there's like a lot of things that I'm being made fun of, like my employability, which is like fragile at best with my mental health. And um, opportunities, I can't actually take advantage of opportunities or advertise myself or have confidence because I actually have this weight
Right.
constantly that's
Right.
interfering with me actually being able to be a successful person, which these like harassers would say that they want, right? They're trying to make fun of me for being a useless person, but their way that they're harassing me actually makes it harder for me to be a so-called useful
Right.
person in our society.
So having not seen the meme purposely, I didn't go and look for it. I don't want to see it. I don't want our listeners going looking for it. So I don't want to give out any information that will give them access to go and do that. Because I don't think we need to carry this on any farther. But it sounds like what they were doing, they were using what they considered to be a stock photo, as you said, of somebody who's trans and non-binary, and equating that to being useless. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of stereotype, um because there's a lot of overlap with chronically ill communities and
Mhm.
trans communities as well,
Right.
because society, when it doesn't accept you and treat you with respect and love, is disabling.
Absolutely.
So like there is a disproportionate overlap there, right? Like I'm not saying like all trans people are disabled. I'm saying that trans people are more likely to become disabled because
Mhm.
of the circumstances within society.
Yep, that makes sense. So this meme, how many people do you think saw this meme?
Oh, millions,
Millions. And would you
millions.
say just in Canada, just in North America? Where did
Um,
it go?
a lot of people in the US, probably mostly in the US, but like definitely as far as Australia, like international, like everywhere. Like,
Wow.
like there's this like the niche community isn't geographic, it's
No,
ideological.
it's true. That's true. And did it use your name?
Um, the first one did, like my dating profile obviously had like my first name, and I have an uncommon first name, as we
Yes.
know.
Yes, you do.
And then like the derivatives, no, right? They would just
Right.
use my face. But the thing is there are enough trans people out there who know me or know of me that they see my face and they know it's me, and I
Right.
get messages and people
Right.
inform me when the meme has been used a lot of the time. So like I'm very aware of its circulation.
Right. So you got reduced from being a person to being an idea by the sounds of it. Like
Yeah,
by people who didn't know you. So they
yeah,
used the idea of you because it was no longer you. Because if they knew you, they couldn't do that. I have no doubt. I barely know you, and I couldn't do that. Um, to give them space to express their hate.
Yeah, yeah. One of the really cool things I did is I did play with the meme in my art.
Mm-hmm.
And as kind of like reclaiming and kind of like clapping back a bit.
Right.
And I did a couple things with that. Like I dressed up as the meme of myself at my job, which was like as a barista at the time.
Ah, cool.
And there was a woman who came in and she was trying to piece together what my costume was, and when she figured out that I was like an internet meme and that it represented like online bullying and online harassment towards trans people, she was just like throwing money in the tip jar. She was
Good.
so excited. She was like,
Good.
"Oh my gosh, my child is trans, like I
Right.
love that you're doing this."
Cool. That's very
and
cool.
and another thing that happened too was I remade the meme into a consensual version. And I said, like, this is a consent certified meme. And, I took the caption and I changed the photo to be what I think would actually match the photo. I changed the pronouns in the caption. And someone messaged me on Facebook and they were like, I saw the way that you remade the meme and I realized that like you were like a person versus
Right.
like something that I was just laughing at, right? And so
Right.
at least one like I
Yay.
shifted people's perspectives.
Yes. Yes. Way to go. We need to just take a little break here, Paint, but we'll come right back, folks, and talk a little bit more about this. You're listening to Rethreading Madness. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm speaking with Paint about cyberbullying, and in particular, what it's like to have become the subject matter of a meme. So Paint, I don't know, how long did this go on for?
So I believe it happened in 2015 or 2016. The worst of it was like over a 6 month period. And then every once in a while it kind of flares up and like comes back into my sort of field of awareness, where people have like pulled additional information about me into hate threads, or the meme is being circulated again, or it's popping up somewhere,
Right.
but kind of like very intermittently. It's not a consistent thing.
Yes. And as somebody who's on social media a lot, there are things that, they come back in, they cycle back in through your awareness. And I'm always surprised when it happens because I think, well, that was true, 2 years ago, and here we are again. What happened to you from this? How did this impact you?
So like when it first started, I was actually at work and I remember I got like sent a DM that was like a Photoshop picture of myself with a baby on a baby. Like, I don't know what it was. And it was this really weird like thing to be sent. And I just like started having like I guess a panic attack. And
Mhm.
my supervisor told me to take the day off and referred me to um their like employee assistance program. So I had
Right,
access to counseling.
right.
And I mean, I needed to go to counseling anyways because I was actually in a very bad place in my life.
Mhm.
I was actually very suicidal when this happened.
Oh my God.
Um, and so it's kind of like the worst time, right?
Yeah,
Like, and the thing is like normally people, if something about them goes viral, they can hop on that and they can use that and they can build some kind of like micro career out of
right.
that kind of attention, like no matter what it is usually. But like this kind of attention, when I'm in that kind of a headspace, I had to shut everything down. And so it's like I feel almost resentful. Like I missed that opportunity to be like, okay, people see my face and I'm notable, right? Like there's something noticeable about me.
Hmm.
And I felt robbed.
Right.
And that was reminiscent of like why I was suicidal as well, was I felt robbed because of an assault that happened that affected my abilities to do kind of like my dream work, which would be
Right.
writing.
Right.
And so it tied into a lot of things. There was like a lot of emotions. But it was a interesting turning point for me because I got help around that time and I started really working on my mental health and really fighting for myself, right? Like this
Hmm.
really pushed me to no longer tolerate a lot of things that were going wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did it feel to become somebody else's or a lot of somebody else's? Um,
I mean, it
Tool. You
just,
became a tool for them to express negative things.
yeah, like
What was that like?
it's like being made into a weapon, right?
Right.
Because it's being used to spread hatred and encourage hatred.
Towards your own
Um,
community.
towards my own community. Yeah, exactly. And so it felt incredibly isolating. And like I felt like my existence was wrong. I felt like my expression of myself was dangerous. Like anything I could say, I would be reinforcing some of these like stereotypes because I am disabled. Like
Mm-hmm.
I do have these like complicating factors to my queerness. I am not like a simple, easily digestible person. And so to make that digestible, it just becomes a subject of mockery, right? It
Yes.
just becomes like because they don't understand it, they laugh at it or they tease it. And so it just made me feel really hurt. I did pursue an autism diagnosis after that. So I joke that the internet diagnosed me before I got diagnosed.
Yay,
And
the internet. Hey,
yeah,
positive.
there's a lot of bittersweetness about it,
Right.
right? And I mean, I don't hate that it happened because it was a turning point for me personally, but it
Mm-hmm.
does give you this like catastrophic tunnel vision. Where like all you can see and feel is the things that other people are saying about you,
Yeah.
right? And that feeling is enormous.
You think that because this happened to you as an adult, that it was different for you than, say, somebody who's a child who's still trying to figure out, not that we don't do it as an adult, but as a child, we're still trying to gel our sense of self and very, very dependent on how the world reflects back to us who we are. That maybe somebody who's a teenager going through cyberbullying, that might have been worse or better or more catastrophic, or
Yeah, catastrophic is the word that I
it
would
is a
use to
very good
describe
year.
it. Like it has that potential for sure.
Yeah.
I've always been very emotional about hearing stories of people who've killed themselves because of online harassment.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to avoid learning too much about these situations myself just because it takes me to it's an ugly place,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it sounds though that even though you weren't able to take advantage of this notoriety you got, not on purpose, to move, say, your writing forward, but you did use it to move your healing process forward.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely did that. Because it was the catalyst. I mean, I'm sure I would have gone to therapy eventually. I just didn't really know it was an option.
Right.
And so I really needed to start going to therapy around the assault and the trauma that I experienced shortly after I came out as trans. Um, and it was devastating to see people try to rewrite my own narrative for me and to try
Mm.
to say, oh, that I'm trans because of this or I'm trans because of that. And people sharing like very personal events from my life and attributing that as like a trauma that like caused me to be trans
Oh my God.
and just making up stories that serve their purposes and using like my vulnerability and my outspokenness as a weapon because when you are a vulnerable outspoken person people can take what they want, they can cherry
Yeah.
pick your life, they can
Yeah.
make any story out of your life that they want.
Would you say that cyberbullying is more problematic than bullying itself?
I mean, I was bullied as a teenager when I was
Mm-hmm.
a kid. And I think it's just an evolution on the forms of bullying. Like, I don't know what the experience of being bullied as a child would be today with the addition of online harassment, because I'm sure that that would play a part
Right.
in the overall experience of what it's like. But I remember how devastating it was when I was a teenager, and I
Right.
remember going to some very dark places in my mind that I'm like it's scary to look back on. How it made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh,
And a lot of those feelings though, like I think they were amplified. I think maybe I would have had more confidence to navigate the kind of bullying that I got if I wasn't if there wasn't like morsels of truth to it, right? Because I was being made fun of by being called like a lesbian, and I didn't know even what it meant to be queer at that
right,
time, right? And I didn't know what it meant to be trans. Like these kinds of people didn't exist in my reality because I was very sheltered and I was in a small town, and it was like something that was like really only shunned, with a very biblical upbringing. Like my family is very supportive as much as they can be now of who I am. But like that took a lot of work to kind of like reframe things and
hmm,
to come to terms with me kind of being who I am and realizing that like they had to accept me for who I am or I was not going to be a part of their lives, and also realizing like I needed to be a part of their lives because I need their support still as an
right,
adult because I struggle so much.
right, right. And it seems to me that in some ways, like even if you're being bullied geographically, say physically around you, you could geographically move. But if you're being bullied on the internet, there is no escape.
Yeah, yeah. And that was one of the really like heartbreaking parts too, was I had people infiltrate my personal networks.
Hmm.
People would pretend to be my friend and I wouldn't know if they were in person people who like just didn't like me but were friends with me on like Facebook or something, or if they were
Right.
someone that I added. And so I had people leaking like private statuses, and even things that like I wrote and like I was kind of like, no, that doesn't really make sense, and deleted, like stuff like that got leaked. Like people were keeping copies of everything of things I was writing online in my private circle. And I used my Facebook as kind of like my own personal support network and my way of processing my thoughts and my emotions, because I don't think things through in my head very easily. Like I need communication and I need conversation for me
Hmm.
to fully understand things just because of the way my mind is wired. And like I don't think that's something that I should be ashamed of, and I don't think that's something that should be mocked. And
No.
I think that's something I should be allowed to do. Like I used to have this like joke motto that I like posted on Twitter once, and it was like, "May my internet skirt be ever too short," right? Because it's like you can't blame me for existing in an authentic way,
No.
right?
No.
And I don't think that that should be mocked.
No. I agree. I absolutely agree. So for folks out there who are being cyberbullied, what would you suggest they do? Got any
Um,
words of wisdom?
Number one would be to prioritize your safety. That
Mhm.
would be the first thing. And so that might mean like locking down your accounts. That might mean doing a purge and removing people from your networks. That might mean choosing which apps you want to use to communicate, uninstalling others, finding some way to like block it out, and like talking to someone about it. Because like for me, going to therapy, talking to my friends, like having a strong support network, like that really help me feel grounded, because I think one of the most important things is to not feel isolated and to still feel grounded in what's true about you.
Yes, exactly. To not adopt or accept somebody else's use of you
Yeah, exactly.
to
Like their
justify.
narrative is not the truth. Your
Absolutely.
narrative, like, like find your narrative and,
Yeah.
and understand what that is.
Yes. Thank you, Paint. That is very, very good advice. Thank you very much. And thanks for coming and chatting with us. I
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. So, folks, we'll be right back. Don't go away. We want to take this opportunity to introduce back to the show William MacPherson. He's a community support worker focused on mental health advocacy and lives on Salt Spring Island. And he is here today to share his poem, which offers words of wisdom and hope around living with mental health challenges.
So this is a rap I wrote for the Connection Project in 2021, where I was a speaker. Damn this isolation. Like my lake swims in winter, the ice needs breaking. The pandemic turned us into a cyber nation. Me, I couldn't bear it, caved in, went into hibernation. belly rumbling for meaning as I awaken, 'cause lives need saving. My own included, but I was in denial, so I'll dispute it. Connection Project 2021? Nope, too scared to do it, feeling stupid. When I've worn a mask, they've seen right through it like a dream that's lucid, translucent. Gotta school myself, beginner's mind, that's the blueprint. Can't be truant if I show up the student. If we're gonna have wildfires, let it be spirit's fire that's lit. Let love be the contagion. Catch it, get inspired and shift. Admire their gifts, unique to every being whose being is mired in grit. The human soul is gold. Watch, the darkness gets retired and lifts. But for the darkness to lift, the darkness must be faced, so the darkness can be integrated, so the darkness becomes grace. That's why we get on stage and share our stories. It's a way to return home and let those of you going through it know you are not alone.
And that's our show, folks. But let me just talk a little bit more about cyberbullying, and most especially about the impact of it. For folks who've been cyberbullied, whether an adult or a child, they may find it hard to concentrate on work. Their performance will drop. You will notice they have lost interest in doing things they previously enjoyed. They may start skipping school or calling in sick to work. They may do things that are in avoidance of anything that has to do with that cyberbullying, including anything that will bring them in contact with the bullying again, i.e. not checking messages or being on social media sites. They may reasonably and understandably become angry. They may turn to drug or alcohols to try and deal with the dark thoughts and emotions that they're experiencing. And victims of cyberbullying are twice as likely to attempt suicide or engage in acts of self-harm. And that stat is all the more frightening when we know that almost 60% of our teens have been bullied or harassed online. Think about that, 60%. It is not hard, if not impossible, at least at the beginning, to not take on the attitudes being expressed in the cyberbullying, even when their rational, logical mind can see that these people don't know them and these lies are not the truth. Nonetheless, the impact is undeniable. So what can you do? Don't participate. Don't share memes that ridicule others. And consider questioning those who do about their motives, outlining some of the impact this has had on the very real people being used to provide amusement for others. Engage, but do so in a way that protects those you may never meet in real life. My thanks to Paint and his candid conversation around his experience of falling through the cracks of the mental health field and of being used as an internet meme, as well as his gracious response to my error in misgendering. I appreciate it all. My thanks to William MacPherson for reciting his poem for us, and to Shari Ulrich and Christina Aguilera for the gift of their music. But most importantly, and as is always, our thanks goes out to you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. I'm Bernadine Fox, and you've just listened to Rethreading Madness, the podcast that dares to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program or want to share your story or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. If you enjoyed this show, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be